Hey there, everybody. It's Eternal Snowman here with another episode of BLT recap and highlights, this time for the semifinals. And it's going to be a little bit different from what I've done in the past, in which I'm going to be breaking down every single match of the series and just going through each match relatively quickly. And I'm going to be going through them in order, of course, and going through how the series broke down. And I'm going to be going through each of the different series in two different videos. This first one is going to be recorded tonight at Saturday night, which is when, like a couple hours ago, I think like 4 or 5 hours ago, we keeping it icy won his match to clinch the semifinals for us and win. So I can record this match. So the other two matches that have yet to happen, the RU and LC match, actually don't matter to the overall standings. Where or like to how the entire set is going to go. So I don't actually need to go through them. So I'm just going to go through all of the matches that did matter and break them down. And then I'll do the same with the Poliwraths versus Weavile set later on once their matches have all finished and the conclusion to that has been determined. Right now it is 3-3 as of the recording of this video, as Jasper Rose has just lost to Peachy Clouds, meaning it's going to be very close with Omnis Draco versus Jordan and Simbo versus Mikav as the last two matches, which are both very good ones. So let's get right into it with the first match that happened being ABPP versus Silver 25X. So just right off the bat, you can see that this match probably won't be the highest quality. Coming into this week already, Silver is going to be a favorite to win because he has performed much better, has shown a lot of improvement, and been like a very solid doubles player for us. ABVP has shown sporadic things, so he doesn't necessarily isn't necessarily the most consistent, and this is very obvious because he brought like one Pokemon that's like semi-viable in doubles, which is like Araquanid, and then like Pelipper can see fringe usage, Slowbro, uh, Octillery, Golem, Gallade are all Pokemon that cannot are just completely unviable. So this replay, you can see ABBP has like no grass resist whatsoever. Bulu is just going to pick up a kill every single turn. As the double protect goes off with the fake out, Bulu just OHKOs the Slowbro, and the Golem goes for Stealth Rocks, I believe, and then Gallade comes in, and Gallade uses Trick Room, I believe, which is like insane. Trick Room Mega Gallade, not very good. Fake Out goes off, and then he faints for some reason as the Woodhammer kills the Gallade. Then we see the Golem use Explosion, kill his own Pelipper, barely dent the enemy team. He has Water Bubble Artillery, which actually kills the Bulu here, but it doesn't accomplish too much as it gets faked out. And then eats the Z move from Zygarde, and the game's over. So, like, I'm not too sure what ABBP was thinking because the team was pretty much like not a viable team, and definitely the bad start for the Zams. However, it's a match going into it that Silver was already going to be a heavy favorite to win, so it wasn't too surprising. Even if the game itself was a bit shocking, the result was pretty much expected. And then into our second match, which was Snow Jinri versus Sanjay, and this was definitely a highlight of one of the highlight matches of the week, as two of the best NU players faced off against each other, and it was definitely going to be a great match. Now, just going into the teams, we can see this is most likely like a steel volley, so this is like likely to be some sort of like Toxic maybe Golbat. Medicham could be threatening if it's like Life Orb with some way of hitting Palossand. Obviously, Passimian is going to be a huge threat. Pinsir is an interesting pick, as we've seen a lot of different versions of Pinsir before. Well, like not in BLT, but like in TLT, we saw London using Pinsir before with Zemi first, but we can also see like a standard Swords Dance with like Tectonic Rage set. And then an interesting pick is also Clawitzer, which puts in a lot of work here, as Golbat is like the primary switch in. So just easy Passimian lead, and just clicks the U-turn right off the bat as it goes into Sovali. And Sovali is going to just hard wall the Golbat, but Golbat also hard walls it. So he actually, Sanjay predicts the switch and goes for the Toxic on the Incineroar, and then goes into his DNC, and Snow's January predicts that, goes for the U-turn, and then parting shots on the switch, expecting to switch on the, and so Sanjay goes into a Steel Volley, predicting the U-turn, and U-turns out. So because I tested with him, one thing that he was pretty scared of was the Braviary, and that's why he brought U-turn Steel Volley, just as a heads up. And pivots into the Golbat, goes for the Brave Bird because he wants to actually hit the Steel Volley on the switch, and just gets a couple free roosts, just trying to make sure it's at high health totals. I'm not too sure what set Ziri is here, but I would assume that he's most likely, yeah, he's just the standard. I'm not too sure why he sacked it here, but I guess he just wants to pressure Golbat because Golbat is a very tough matchup for him. Or specifically, Taunt Toxic is a tough matchup for him, because there's no real way for him to pressure the Golbat other than like trying to knock it off somehow. And he goes into his Pinsir to try to pressure it, and Stone Edge most likely means that it's some sort of Tectonic Rage set. He reveals Tectonic Rage, but Sanjay reveals the Shuckaberry and gets a lot of damage off onto the Pinsir, which is very important as the Pinsir could have potentially threatened a lot because Stone Edge would hit the Golbat, Earthquake the Silvally, and of course X-Scissor on the Slowbro. And then Sanjay managed to pick up the kill with Sneasel and then sacks it. Sneasel not being too important in this matchup, as it doesn't hit too much. And then he importantly here reveals the counter Slowbro, which is really sick tech for beating up on Passimian, as it answers like how it works is because a lot of times when you send in Slowbro on the Passimian, like exactly that situation, it'll just U-turn out, and you can't really punish a lot of the switch-ins to Slowbro, especially like opposing Slowbros or like other like bona fide like Slowbro answers. So like a good way to do that is counter, which is a really interesting tech. And so but Ziri pretty much just pivoting around with the U-turns and parting shots, and right now it's really hard for Sanjay to get an advantage, but he manages to get in the Steel Volley to get off the defog against Incineroar, and also doesn't die to the Fire Blast because Steel Volley is like hella tanky. But he just ends up sacking it because he doesn't really want anything else on his team to take too much damage. So Sanjay goes into his Golbat and trades his Eviolite to get some health back. And then in return, Ziri ends up sacking his Steel Volley, which was super low at that point. And here, Ziri actually reveals a really cool set, which is sub or toxic. Wait, what the heck? Sub leftovers on his Clawitzer, and picks up both uh, the kill onto Slowbro and a lot of damage onto Medicham. And Sanjay ends up losing the Medicham to the Life Orb recoil. So it ends up being Golbat versus Clawitzer. Toxic, and because Water Pulse actually doesn't kill here, or like doesn't do over 50, that much over 50, it's actually in Sanjay's favor to win this if he doesn't get confused. And the confusion rate is 20%, or for Water Pulse to confuse, I believe, is 20%, and the actual hit of confusion is 20%. So it's actually like a relatively low chance that he loses this here. But it comes like right down to the wire here, as he manages to not get hit in confusion any of these times. And then the Passimian actually cannot pick up the kill from this range, because Passimian obviously like not too good at dealing with Golbat. And then the Golbat eventually wins with the Toxic. So it ends up being an insanely close game, coming down right to the wire. And well played by both sides, but the Golbat puts in so much work here as it deals with everything, and the one mon that it didn't really deal with well, which was the Steel Volley, ends up getting picked up by the counter tech from Slowbro, which was very interesting. So that puts the Laxes up 2-0, and puts us into our third match, which was Kather versus Saba 1-1-1. Once again, Kather for the Laxes and Saba 1-1-1 for the Alakazams. And just heading into this match, I would say Kather is pretty heavily favored with great performances every week in Monotype versus Saba, who has not shown up very well. And from team preview, we can see it's very, very difficult already for Saba to win, because the mono flying mirror is very difficult for the one that, like, if one side has Thunderous Therian, then it's going to be heavily favored towards that side. So because of the Thunderous Therian, it's going to be near impossible for Saba to pick up this win unless he plays extremely well. And starts off with, so the win conditions here for Kather are going to be just to Toxic the Zapdos, and if the or like some way trips the Zapdos, and if it or set up with Thunderous so that the Zapdos goes down and everything else will drop. And for on Kather's side, like pretty much, or sorry, for on Saba's side, pretty much like it requires the Zapdos to be healthy and somehow deal with a lot of his team. So on turn 1, already gets Toxic, is a terrible position with no form of Heal Bell, meaning like there's not much. Like this matchup has already like proven to be extremely difficult, and it's really hard for both sides to pressure Celesteela outside of their Electricmon, but it's not that big of a deal because Celesteela can't really put major dents in like the Pokemon that it really needs to, which is like you can just pivot around between Gliscor and Tornadus, which means like can't really do that much, and both Celesteelas get knocked off here. And so you pretty much will see here that until they'll just like go back and forth and play a bunch of pretty much, I would say, garbage turns until Kather can get in his Thunderous, as like pretty much no advantages are really gained. There's the Hurricane into the Confusion, but it wasn't like a huge deal. So pretty much no real advantages are gained here, just like pivoting back and forth between the Mons. You get the Toxic on the Mantine, however the Mantine isn't an important Mon in this matchup for either side. And you just pivot around. See Zapdos getting chipped a little bit. And Kaither's trying to knock these Zapdos, but doesn't manage to do so successfully. As you can see here, the Celesteela can't really do much to Gliscor, as Gliscor can't really do much to the opposing Gliscor or just like in general sub his team. And this like flying paradigm of pretty much just switching back and forth is kind of established. So we see a little bit of chip go onto the Zapdos, but not too much, honestly. And they're just pivoting back and forth, and just like not many things are getting done. And so we're just gonna try to see. So here, okay. So he goes into the Aerodactyl, and pretty much like the Celesteela is like the perfect pivot because it walls like the majority of opposing flying teams. But it also can't really gain advantages versus like a lot of stuff. Like it doesn't do much versus like Tornadus or anything. So here, finally on turn 46, he manages to get an opportunity to get into the Thundurus for free on a double, and just clicks the HP Ice, and you can see here that there's like nothing much that Saba could do in this matchup because it's just so hard to deal with the Thundurus. And as he's trying to pivot around, Kaither actually ends up setting up an Agility, which is even worse, meaning like there's nothing that Saba can do. Everything at this point just drops to like a move, HP Ice, and Tornadus drops to the Thunderbolt. Yeah, and so everything just goes down. And so this matchup was just a really good matchup for Kaither, managing to snipe out the mono flying mirror. And he managed to play it decently well, just played it safe, and got into his win condition and won the game pretty well. And so after this match, this is the third match. The fourth match was actually between me and MJ, and of course that match was already broken down in another video of mine. Go check that out if you're interested. It was a great match. I managed to pick up the win, putting the Laxes ahead 4-0 heading into this fifth match, meaning that we just need one more match to clinch the entire series and put ourselves into a finals position. And I would say that everyone performed really well, with myself and Sanjay picking up key wins because those are the swing matchups where he's Kaither and Silver managed to beat up on opponents that managed to clinch wins that were expected of them, but obviously that's not to diminish their wins in any way. They managed to play well and play to their win conditions, so that was a good job to them as well. And so we head into the next match, which was Kyotoshi versus Sand, a OU match. So from team preview, Kyotoshi is pretty weak to Zygarde, especially if it's banded, because it Kyotoshi has very limited switches to ban Zygarde. On the other side, though, Celesteela is pretty troublesome for Sand, as many of his mons are walled by Celesteela. So we can just get into it. He starts off with a Landorus. It's most likely going to be some sort of some sort of rocks set. So Kyotoshi goes for the Surf. Ends up being a HO Landorus lead, and because he doesn't want to give Kyotoshi the free Ash Gren, he goes into his Greninja. Honestly here, I think Kyotoshi could have just gone for the Surf again, but I understand why he switched out. he was trying to scout the potential of a Scarf Gran with U-turn. However, his team comp doesn't really seem like that would be how it would be. However, like that said, it's always nice just to play safe. He goes for the Dark Pulse, revealing that he is also Ashgran, and he eats the Spore, which was a safe play on Kyotoshi's part. And Amoonguss is now pretty low, and thus can't really deal with a lot of the stuff that it has to. But at the very least, Greninja is asleep, so that's an advantage that Kyotoshi picked up. Zygarde reveals that it's not banned, importantly, and goes into the Tapu Lele, which pretty much takes no damage from the HP Ice. And he pivots back into his Zygarde, and Zygarde is just so threatening for this team, as you need to keep the Celesteela healthy, so you can't keep it in, and most of the other mons can't really take a hit reliably. So, that said, Kyotoshi manages to find himself in a position to pick up a kill with the U-turn, but his Rotom goes down to the Z move of Tapu Lele, and Lele eats a fake out here, meaning that now it's now in range for some sort of like Ice Punch or whatever. And so he picks up the kill with Medicham. Or actually, no, he goes into his Greninja to try to pick up the kill with to get Ash Form, which is, I wouldn't say necessarily like a greedy play, but it was a pretty safe play. He then keeps his Ashgren in, and as Sam reveals Kartana. Honestly, I felt that it could have been played differently, as this was almost guaranteed to be a Scarf cart based on the way that Sand played it, unless he was bluffing. Also, just by team composition, as he already revealed not Scarf on the other two potential Scarfers. I think it could have been possible that he pivoted into his Amoonguss just to keep the Ash Greninja for pressure, because it did pressure both his Zygarde and Tapu Lele, which was like an important pressure matchup and could also be like a potential Steel Strike switch in. However, like it's also kind of safe because, it's not Steel Strike, Smart Strike. Anyway, so he goes into his Medicham, which has now pressures pretty heavily. Goes for the high jump kick. It's fine because the only resist was Tapu Lele, or like solid resist was Tapu Lele, and that would have and as he does good Tapu Lele, it doesn't really matter. Then Sand goes into his Alakazam and just gets some chip on Celesteela. However, it's not too much. Kyotoshi goes for the Leech Seed and actually doesn't get anything, and so he has to sack his Amoonguss now for the to the Kartana, which he can't really deal with, and goes into his Medicham once again, pressuring to get a kill. And Sand sacks his Kartana as it's no longer necessary versus the Celesteela and Landorus. And so Sand goes to his Zygarde as Celesteela comes out, and this is I didn't super understand why he did that specifically, but thought that was moderately interesting. As he goes for the Leech Seed now on the Zygarde. I assume he wanted the Intimidate, but I guess he was just like not sure of what he wanted. And he reveals Sub on Celesteela, and it's Sub Leech Seed, and I assume Heavy Slam is the last slot, but never can be too sure about that. He goes for the Leech Seed again on the Alakazam, and it's just pretty much at this point if he will get paired or not, because it's really hard. Well, okay. If he doesn't get paired, there's still no guarantee that Kyotoshi wins from this point. It's just really tough, as he has to win 50-50s like in a lot of different places, and it's pretty much guaranteed at this point that Zygarde would be Ayapapa, which is what makes it even harder, as if it gets low, then it's really hard to deal with. And the first pair comes actually on this turn, which is like relatively crucial. Kyotoshi later on said that he actually collects Heavy Slam on that turn, so it would have been a very important turn to actually hit on. Um, and so, like, instead, we're pretty much put into this paradigm of, like, Kyotoshi had to pretty much rely on Sand choking, but he doesn't, and so in the end, this is what happens, and Sand manages to pick up the first win for the Alakazams and bring it to the series score to 4-1. And now going into the 6th game, keeping it icy versus Fejiro. So far, there's been a lot of good matches, notably me versus MJ. Kyotoshi versus Sand ended up being a very good match, as well as Sanjay versus Snow Jinri that came down to the wire. Now, this game, I would say, is not very good. Probably one of the lower quality games of the semifinals. And that is mostly not like a knock on the players, but more so that I expected a lot more out of these two players. And I've seen them play much better. They just didn't play well specifically in this game. But okay, we can just get right into it. So, just looking at the teams, Scizor looks extremely good versus Fejiro, as the only answer really is Empoleon, having 3 Mons weak to Steel, and Latias, which is pretty bad versus Scizor, and Crocodile, which is not a solid answer to Scizor. And so the lone Pokemon that can deal with Scizor is Empoleon. On the other side, and also Mamoswine is a very good matchup here. On the other side, keeping it icy is pretty weak to Latias, as the only Pokemon that can really deal with Latias well is Scizor. These two Pokemon can kind of soft check it, but not really. And then the Crocodile trapping the Latias means that Terrakion could put in a lot of work as well. More so as like you pressure once and then you have to pivot out. The problem with that is that even though Terrakion is really good because it loses to Scizor, and Scizor beats so much of Fejiro's team, it's very hard for the Terrakion to realistically put in a lot of work. Also, Mamoswine is going to be like an important mon for both teams. So leading off, he leads Mamo versus the Mega Venusaur, and Venusaur just goes for the Sludge Bomb. Mamoswine is going to be an important mon in this matchup just because Mamo is really good. And so we see Fejiro go for the Scald. Pretty much just predicting that he's going to go into the Mega Venusaur when he's fishing for burns. We see keeping it icy go into the Venusaur, and we just see some pivoting around as just like solid answers to each of the mons, and keeping it icy manages to get a burn on Empoleon. This is relatively important as it negates its leftovers recovery, which is pretty important in this matchup, as we see. As I discussed, Empoleon is very important in this matchup, and it getting chipped is very, very good for keeping it icy. And as Fejiro is going for the burn fish, I can see why he's doing it because Mega Venusaur is extremely hard to take down, but I don't agree because Empoleon is such an important mon in this matchup. Because of the fact that Scizor would otherwise run through this team. Now he goes into the Latias finally here after letting his Empoleon get chipped an insane amount, and goes into the Sylveon. Now here is a play that I heavily don't agree with from keeping it icy's part. Now one of the things that going into Sylveon indicates that he's going to try to wish pass back into the Empoleon, and the Empoleon and putting it back at full health. So like that's just like a very bad position because you want the Empoleon to get chipped as much as possible. So you want to have something to pressure it. But anyway, even then, keeping it icy does manage to scout that out and go into his Mamoswine and click Stealth Rocks. Here's another play I heavily disagree with. Keeping it icy later does also tell me that he agrees that this is a misplay. there's two main reasons that you should have clicked Earthquake here. First is that there's no solid answer to Mammo on Fedrigo's side. So even if it's like trying to switch into like the Crocodile or like the Sylveon, you're still going to pick up a kill. And the second reason is because Stealth Rocks is very inefficient versus Fedrigo's team, with Fedrigo having 3 different Rocks resists, and the other 3 Pokemon not being Rock weak at all. And it doesn't really pick up important numbers for his team, so it's more important for him to actually just go for the Earthquake. And ends up that he manages to, he loses or not, like his Mamoswine, which is an extremely important one in this matchup, um, gets weakened heavily. But then here he goes for the Earthquake, and he reveals he's not Life Orb, so he does manage to pick up the kill on the Sylveon with actually the Groundinium Tectonic Rage, which is a pretty cool set, but managed to pick up the kill. And then as Fedrigo goes for the Rocks, he calls that out and goes for the Earthquake, and loses his Mammo afterwards. There's no point in switching out at that point because he was already in Rock's range. So he goes into a Scizor and doesn't predict correctly, as in between Earthquake versus Earthquake Ice Shard and Bullet Punch Roost. And so his Scizor gets chipped a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. And then he goes into his Mega Venusaur as his answer to Empoleon and goes ahead, and I believe he clicks Leech Seed here, yeah. As once again, Fedrigo is fishing for the Scald, and once again, I don't agree with this, especially even more so here because of the fact that Sylveon is no longer in this matchup. So here we see the pivot into Latios, and then the Mantine comes out and he pivots into the Togekiss. Here I see where he was going for, because he was trying to scout for Dragonium. At least that's what I assume he was doing. But I don't necessarily think that's a good idea for 2 main reasons. The first is that Mantine it's going to be harder for Mantine to actually recover at 26%, and if the Dragonium does go off, then so what? Like, the Mantine is already pretty much dead at this point. But anyway, he does manage to go into his Togekiss and goes for the Dazzling Gleam and reveals Scarf as he picks up, the Terrakion picks up a kill, but at the cost of a lot of HP. So the Terrakion is forced out after the Scizor comes in, and keeping it ice, he just goes for the Bullet Punch and reveals Life Orb. It's a relatively safe play, but it means that Scizor is taking chip. Here, also notably, he reveals that he's not Water Absorb on Mantine, so one of the things that he messed up on it in this game was that he didn't set his abilities correctly between the Mantine and the Togekiss. And then Fedrigo goes into the Crocodile. I assume he was trying to go for try to catch the Roost with like some sort of knockoff play. But the problem with that is that even if he does manage to knock off the Mantine, there would have been a better answer to that. Like going into his Empoleon and trying to knock off, or going into or like knocking off with Empoleon or like something else. Like, it wasn't worth it to go to Crocodile at all. And he gets heavily punished by actually getting the burn as he reveals Facade, but it still does no damage even when burned. And so Keeping Icy gets a free recover here, and then here's another time when I see like a huge misplay from Keeping It Icy's end, which is that he tries to heavily damage the Latios and ends up sacking the Venusaur. I would have kept Venusaur, like personally I would have kept Venusaur, but I guess I could see the logic behind this, where he doesn't want to give Latios like a free switch or like a free setup. But like, this is a huge mistake from Fedrigo's end, trying to set up on the Venusaur, because he ends up taking so much residual damage that you can't actually like outpace it, meaning that he just has to kill the Venusaur instead, which is just like, he could have been in a position where he could have just stayed at +1, but been in a better position to like finish the rest of the game. So he ends up going for the Draco Meteor. I'm still not too sure why he went for that. I assume to scout the Latias switch in. But anyway, he goes for, he then switches out of the Scizor to his Empoleon. As keeping it icy, goes straight into the Latias. And this is caught with the knockoff from Empoleon. I would have personally roosted with Scizor, but like honestly, that was like a fine play. But here, Keeping It Icy plays this part a little bit bad as he tries to Draco and then Trick. I guess he just didn't make up his mind as to what he wanted to click and ends up actually eating extra damage. And then he roosts. Choice Specs Roost, yeah, a little bit weird, but pretty much as an answer to stall. And then just like this is like such like a weird way to do this, but that happened, and so Keeping Icy also made a mistake here by if at 11%, if he switches out of the Lottie, sacks the Mantine and comes back, it resets the toxic damage. It means that he's in such a good position for Latias to clean the game. And he goes into the Crocodile, clicks Pursuit, and Pursuit was always the wrong play there. And Draco was also the wrong play there. Because Draco, but actually this exact set of plays is what sets up Keeping It Icy to win the match, as he goes into his Scizor, and the Scizor actually lives the Scarf Pursuit with Burn, and means that Fejiro loses the match, which is ridiculous because, okay, first off, there was a massive throw to click Pursue. Second, it was a massive throw to click, I felt like this end game sequence was so badly executed because like the main issue here was like that okay, first off, if you clicked like any move except for Pursuit, it would have meant that Scizor couldn't have roosted, and if Scizor couldn't have roosted, that means that the Scizor would have been in range for the Terrakion Quick Attack, which like he later reveals that he's actually Quick Attack, meaning like he had a guaranteed win, but threw it away. So I felt like the end game was just played pretty badly on both sides, but that did end up spelling victory for the Laxes, as we did go up 5-1 after this game and pick up the semifinals win. And although there were a couple misplays in that last game, I do think that the series is very enjoyable, not only to play but to watch and just be a part of, and definitely one of the higher quality BLT overall matches that we've ever had, and one of the best sets and personal games that I've played in the Uber's metagame. So I had a lot of fun with it. I hope the Zams also had a lot of fun, so good game to them and good series, and thanks for giving us a great series. But we're going to be looking towards the finals, either the Weaviles or the Poliwraths as our next opponents, and hopefully try to take home the BLT trophy. And I'll see you guys in the next video of BLT recap and highlights, where I'm going to be taking a look at the Poliwraths versus Weaviles series and doing something kind of similar to this. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and that's about it for this one. So I'll see you guys then in the next episode of BLT recap and highlights. Bye-bye.